Welcome to Breakout of Loops with Python's break keyword. I'm Joseph, and you could say I'm here to break things down for you in this video course. Loops are a core feature in Python. No doubt you use them all the time, but are you getting the most out of them? This course is about the break keyword, its use cases, its nuances, and its hidden potential. We'll also spend some time looking at for loops, while loops, and the continue keyword. The best part? You'll examine these through a series of realistic examples reflecting their actual usefulness. So in this course, you can expect to learn how to exit a loop early with the break statement, the differences between break and continue, what to consider when using break in nested loops, and how the else and continue keywords can be used to write even more complex control flows. You might wonder, what should you know to get the most out of this course? Well, it'll help if you're familiar with the basics of Python, concepts like variables, built-in data types like strings and lists, and conditionals. But of course, I'll be explaining all the code as we go along. However, because a strong grasp on conditionals will be key to understanding the examples in upcoming lessons, if you do need a refresher, I recommend the tutorial, Conditional Statements in Python. All right, in the next lesson, an overview of the break statement. So why not go with the flow, or in this case, the control flow, and meet me there. Loops are a key control flow structure found in most languages, Python included. What's control flow? Well, when programming was new, you had programs where code could only run in order, line by line, from the top of a program to the bottom. But it didn't take long writing code like that to realize its severe limitations. And this is where the concept of control flow structures comes in. They direct code execution, allowing complex programs with many branching paths. There's lots of different kinds, but in this course, we focus on loops, the control flow structures that enable repeating code blocks a fixed number of times or based on some condition. There's two different kinds of loops you'll find in Python. For loops, which iterate over a collection of items, ending when that collection is exhausted. They also have a fixed number of iterations, the only exception being if the collection happens to have infinite items, but we won't worry about that today. For loops are commonly used when you need to take each element in a collection and do something with it. Process it, validate it, etc. Then you have while loops. They repeat a code block based on some condition, continuing to run while that condition is true. As a result, they have potentially infinite iterations. While loops are great for when you don't know in advance how many times you need to loop, often used for actions like gathering user inputs or managing the event loop in games or other interactive apps. Usually, you won't actually want your while loops to run forever, and often you don't want your for loops to go through all of the items in their collections. This is where the break keyword comes in. The break keyword can be used with either kind of loop, and exits the loop immediately, with code execution resuming after the loop. Similar to break, in Python you'll also find the continue keyword. Continue doesn't exit a loop, but instead skips the remainder of the loop body, meaning that code execution resumes with the next iteration of the loop. With while loops, this means they start by checking the condition in the loop header. Now open the REPL and we'll take a look at an example of each of these in action. First, create a list to iterate over. Call it fruits. Fruits equals the list of strings apple, guava, melon, banana, lime. So a straightforward loop that prints each element in the list would look like this. For fruit and fruits, print fruit. The variable fruit takes on the value of each element in the list, one at a time, and is then printed. So the output is all 5 fruits. If you want to find banana in the list and stop processing the list at that point, you can use break. For fruit in fruits, if fruit equals banana, using the equality operator, break. Otherwise, print fruit. Run the loop and you see apple, guava, melon. No banana and no lime, because the loop stopped at banana. If instead you wanted to just avoid printing banana, you could use continue. For fruit and fruits, if fruit is equal to banana, continue. Otherwise, print fruit. And you see apple, guava, melon, and lime. Because when banana is found, continue moves on to the next item, skipping printing banana. And what if you use break outside of a loop? Yep, you get a syntax error. Break outside loop. No further explanation needed. All right, that's basic usage. I hope you enjoyed these fruit loops. Next up, we'll focus on a more practical example of using break with a for loop. See you there. We are back in the REPL for this one. In this example, say you're a teacher and you're working on evaluating your students based on their test scores. Sounds reasonable. Create a list called scores, storing the following integers: 90, 30, 50, 70, 85, 35. Consider this a list of one student's test scores. With a minimum score of 60 to pass, you want to take this list and see how many of the tests received a failing grade. You might do it like so. Create a variable to track fails called num_failed scores and set it to 0. Num_failed scores equals 0. And a variable to store the score for a passing grade to compare against. Set it to 60. Pass score equals 60. Then iterate over the list of scores, comparing each against pass score and incrementing num_failed scores by 1 each time a score is less than pass score. For score and scores, if score less than pass score, num_failed scores plus equals 1. Run the loop and take a look. Print the F string, number of failed tests, colon, the value of num_failed scores. And this shows the number of failed tests is 3, because 3 items in scores were less than 60. Good start, but what if what you actually want to do isn't just count the fails, but flag the student for tutoring if they've failed at least 2 tests? While you could keep the code as is and compare num_failed scores after the loop runs, that's inefficient. Any processing of the list after a second failure is found is a waste. That makes this a perfect use case for break. Let's rewrite the loop accordingly. First, create a new variable called needs_tutoring, set to the string no. Reset num_failed scores to 0. And there's no need to reset pass score since the variable still exists and hasn't changed. Start the loop in the same way. For score and scores, if score less than pass score, num_failed score plus equals 1. But now add a second if condition in line with the first. If num_failed scores is greater than or equal to 2, set needs_tutoring to yes and break out of the loop. And now run the loop and see the result. Print the F string, does the student need tutoring? Value of needs tutoring. And yes, they do. And you'll see the value of num_failed scores is 2 instead of 3, showing that indeed the loop exited early. And that's one way you can use break to save a little time and processing power. If you're looking for more practice with for loops, check out Python for loops the Pythonic way. Otherwise, you can take a break from being a teacher in the next lesson, where instead you'll play game developer.